Give me 1 second. Am I audible? First of all, Jai, Lakshay, audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll start with RC today, reading comprehension. GRE clubs RC and reading comprehension and critical reasoning under one topic only, RC. Okay. So officially GRE doesn't separately talk about critical reasoning. It just clubs both of them under critical reasoning, under reading comprehension topic. But we'll treat them differently because there are certain aspects of critical reasoning which are very different. Okay, certain question types are there, so we'll treat them differently. We'll take different sessions for CR. Okay, I mean, just in case you think that we are not doing those kind of questions, we'll treat them differently. And again, in GRE RC, uh, you know, in the latest edition of GRE, the smaller version that we had like from 1.5 years, GRE is moving towards smaller RCs. Okay, so an RC less than 15 lines is a small RC. Okay, I mean around 10 lines would be small RC. 10 to 15 or 10 to 20 lines would be medium size RC, and more than let's say 20 lines would be a big RC. Around 30, 35 lines would be a big RC. Okay, so most of the RC that you'll get would be like in this range. Okay, within 20 lines. Okay, less than 20 lines. Most of the RCs. I'm not saying all, but uh, let's say more than half of your RCs would be around 10 to 12 lines max. And there could be few RCs which are like about 20 lines. And GRE officially is saying that there won't be long RCs, uh, but we can still do one or two long RCs, and we can, just to be ready in case we have such an RC. Okay, long RC doesn't necessarily mean it's difficult. Okay, length of the RC is not an indication of difficulty level. We can have very small RC but very difficult questions. Okay, so I mean, if we just take care of small and big, medium size RCs, length of an RC will not be an issue. Maybe we can have a 30, 35 line RCs. We'll practice some of them so that in case we encounter such RCs, we can take care of them. Okay, so that's one thing. Again, if we have a small RC, we'll have like 2 questions. If we have medium size RC, we can have like 3 questions, up to 3 questions. Okay, not more than that. And if we have a really big RC, then we can have 4 questions, but not with medium size RCs. That's one thing. Second, we'll have 3 types of questions with RCs. Okay, 3 types of questions. One, 5 options. Questions having 5 options, only one option correct. Okay. Second, questions having like lesser number of options but multiple options correct. Generally, we have 3 to 4 options in such a question. In RC specifically. Okay. And third, questions with no option. Okay. See, we have questions with no options in quant section as well, where we had to type, we need to type the answer in the chat. I mean, in the box. Okay. There'll be an answer box and we'll be typing the answer in that box in quant. But in RC, no option doesn't mean we'll have to type the answer. No, we'll have to select the sentence. Okay. For example, select a sentence which talks about so and so thing. So we just have to click the sentence in the RC. That's it. Okay. When we will click the sentence, it'll get, kind of selected. The sentence will get selected. That's all we need to do, nothing else. Okay. That's how the answer would be marked. Right. So for example, on the screen, on the left hand side, there'll be the passage, and the right hand side, there'll be questions. Okay. So let's say the question is select the sentence which talks about so and so. So on the left hand side in the passage, we'll just click on the correct sentence. That's it. Okay. We don't have to drag or something. We just have to click on the sentence. That's it. It'll be answered. Okay. So these are three types of questions that we have in RCs. Okay. And again, the difficulty level, the three types of questions, they have nothing to do with the difficulty level. Any question can be equally difficult. Okay. So that's about it. Second, and the reason, why GRE clubs, RCs, and CR, critical reasoning, under one topic is because when we have a smaller RC, okay, it is just an extension of a critical reasoning question only, actually. Okay. Okay. But that extension makes it different in many ways. That's why we'll treat them differently. Okay. We'll not club them. Okay. Okay. Coming to reading comprehension. So we'll do 2-3 sessions, first of all, to cover RC as a topic. And then we'll do 2 sessions in critical reasoning, 2 to 3 sessions. Okay. So reading comprehension, if I have to, talk about one thing that we need to master, that would be your reading strategy. GRE wants you to read the passage in a particular way. Okay. Especially when the passage size is getting smaller and smaller. Okay. So what it wants you to do is read or understand the role played by every line. Okay. Role played by every line. Okay. Now, there are different roles a particular line can play in this context of an RC. Okay. It can give me some information or evidence. Information, evidence. It can be some claim of a person. Okay. It can be, if it is some evidence or information, it is in support of some claim or against some claim. It's supporting the claim or it's weakening or undermining the claim. Okay. Again, some information or evidence can be an example of some phenomena. Example of something which is mentioned. Okay. Example of something already mentioned. For example, the study reveals certain startling facts about life of a person. Okay. For example, okay. So some startling, I know in the previous line we talked about some startling facts, study revealing some startling fact about a person. So there could be an example of that startling fact. Whatever the line is talking about, okay. When we start something with, for example, that means we are giving example of what was mentioned in the previous line. Okay. The line just before it. So there could be some example of startling fact here. Okay. So this line or this information is telling me about, or it's an example of a fact or something mentioned earlier in the line. Okay. That's what it is. Fifth, a particular line can simply be elaborating about something, elaborating about a claim. Okay. For example, uh, uh, let's say, certain or something is, let's say, odd. Some happening is odd. After that, the next, let's say, 2-3 lines are merely explaining why the author is calling it odd. Okay. It's elaborating, expanding on the claim itself. Okay. Understood? So, two, three things. Whenever you encounter any claim or opinion, you know, in the passage, okay? Claim or opinion means something is good, something is bad, something is, let's say, odd, something is paradoxical, something is ironic, okay? I mean, you need to understand something, some reason why the author is calling that way, okay? Some adjective is getting used. What is the reason why the author is using that particular adjective about something? Okay. So these are like 4, 5 roles that a particular line can play in the context of an RC. We just have to, and it's not that you have to write it anywhere. Okay. You can, write it to some extent that, line 2 to 3 plays this kind of role. Okay. But if it is small RC, 7, 8 lines are there, you don't have to write it. You just have to remember what is happening, in a particular line. Okay. At a particular point in RC, what's happening. Okay. Again, let's practice some of them, and then we'll be able to figure out what exactly is this. Okay. So just see first passage. A small passage really, like less than 10 lines, I guess. And 2 questions, solve them. Okay. Give them a try and read it carefully. Right? Read it very, very carefully. Give them a try. The first 2 questions, I mean, first RC 2 questions. Okay, let's see, guys, the answers. Let's read the passage. Ragwort was accidentally introduced to New Zealand in the late 19th century, and like so many invading foreign species, quickly became a pest. Okay, so first line obviously is introducing the topic, right? First line, the only role first line plays is introducing a topic. Okay, so the topic here is we are talking about some invasive species which became a pest. Okay, it uh, uh, started invading New Zealand and became an invasive species, became a pest. Pest means it spread quickly. So we are talking about that thing. By the 20s, the weed was rampant. Okay, this is giving me some information about that pest only, that species. What made matters worse was that its proliferation coincided with sweeping changes in agriculture and a massive shift from sheep farming to dairying. Okay. So it's telling me some phenomena, okay, that you know things took a turn for worse because the proliferation, the expansion of the species coincided with changes and shifts in agriculture. Okay. Now, author says matters became worse because of this thing. You need to ask why. Let's see how. Ragwort contains a battery of toxic and resilient alkaloids. Okay. Even honey made from its flowers contain the poison in dilute form. Okay. Livestock generally avoid grazing where ragwort is growing, but they will do so once it displaces grass and clover in their pasture. So once there is no grass, only ragwort is there, livestock will have to eat that. Okay. And that's why we are calling, it's a disaster, or, it was problematic when the shift happened from sheep farming to dairying. So cattle will eat it. Livestock will, start eating this thing. That's why it became a problem. It took a turn for the worst thing. So this line is merely expanding upon this claim. Okay. Claim is, things took a wrong turn, bad turn because of this shift in agriculture. And it just explains why that claim has been made, why we are, saying so. Okay. Understood that point? That is very important. We need to link the lines with each other. Okay. Some claim was made here that it was bad, and we are merely expanding as to why the author called it bad, or why the author, connected proliferation of the weed with shift in agriculture. Is that point clear? That's very, very important. Okay. Understanding this connection is the key here. Okay. Those sheep can eat it for months before showing any signs of illness. If cattle eat it, they sicken quickly and fatality can even result. Again, part of that explanation only why shift from sheep farming to dairying created more problems. Okay. Sheep could, uh, kind of tolerate it for months, but cattle doesn't tolerate it and it can lead to a fatality immediately, quickly. Okay. So what we are doing is in the passage, we introduced ragwort and it invaded. And what made matters worse was it's, linking its proliferation to shift in dairy farming, shift towards dairy farming. And this entire thing explains why this connection turned out bad. Is that clear, everyone? Connecting the lines with each other, that's very, very important. And that's all we need to practice. Okay. Any doubts with understanding the passage, let me know. And let me tell you, it's a small passage, but there is quite some stuff in this small passage. It's packaged well. Okay. Okay, let's come to the questions. First, the passage suggests that, first of all, what answers do we have? A and B. So first we have A, and second we have B. Okay. Abhilasha, what are your answers? Okay. The passage suggests that proliferation of ragwort was particularly ill-timed because it. Okay. So ill-timed was, this line tells me why it was ill-timed. Okay. And again, one more thing. Let's say there is a question which says select a sentence in the paragraph which tells me that proliferation of ragwort was ill-timed. Which sentence we'll select? We'll select this. We'll just click on this sentence. That anywhere on this sentence we'll click, and it'll be answered. It's like that. Okay, understood. So that will encounter those questions quickly. Okay. So what it says is it was ill-timed because this proliferation coincided with changes in agriculture and a shift from sheep farming to dairy. Okay. So our answer should capture that information, right? So because the proliferation coincided with and exacerbated a decline in agriculture. All of you are picking option A. Where does in the passage it say that agriculture is in decline? Where does it say? Changes in agriculture and shift from sheep farming to dairying. How on earth does it mean decline in agriculture? Jay, does it mean decline?
No, like I was also confused about that, but I
Okay.
feel I
Do
thought
we have in the entire paragraph which says there was decline in agriculture?
no, no.
Everything that it says after that is because, agriculture, sheep farming shifted to dairy farming. And that's why it was more problematic for cattle and, livestock. That's the only problem. Nowhere does it say agriculture decline and it overtook and those kind of things. Nowhere does it say. Lakshay, we don't have decline in agriculture anywhere,
Yes, sir. I was
right?
confused with A and E.
A and E.
So,
Okay. Abhilasha,
yeah.
same confusion with you. You don't have decline, right? A is out for sure.
Okay.
Okay, everybody agrees with me that A is out because there is no mention of decline in agriculture. So we can't, answer something which is not, some information which is not mentioned in the passage. Okay, we can't. Second, just 1 second. Yeah, 1 second. Hmm. Second, the proliferation took place in conditions that enabled the ragwort to spread faster than it otherwise would have done. No, it just coincides with shift in agriculture, changes in agriculture. It led to an increase in the amount of toxic compounds contained in the plants. No, this information is not captured here. Out. Prevented people from producing honey that could be eaten safely. I mean, it prevented people from producing honey. No, what it says is there is a possibility that honey made from its flowers contains the poison in dilute form. Okay, it prevented people from producing safe honey. No, we can't say that. People couldn't produce safe honey. And again, is it the problem area here? That's why we are calling it's a problem? No. It had, this is the only option left over. The proliferation had consequences for livestock that were more dramatic than they otherwise would have been. That's what it leads to. The shift was happening from sheep farming to dairying. And it just explains how shifting to dairy farming coincided with the proliferation and it created more problems. That's what last 2-3 lines explain. That's all. Okay. Is that clear now? Jay, Lakshay, Abhilasha? Why E is the answer?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it simply expands on what was written here and it simply summarizes last 2-3 lines. That's it. Okay. Again, decline in agriculture, nowhere is it mentioned. Out. All of the B, C, and D are easy to remove these options. So that's out it. Okay, let's see the second. So second is, more than one correct option could be there. I mean, okay. So what it says is select all that are correct. So there could be one option correct. There could be more than one option correct. Okay, let's see. Uh, Select all that apply. The passage implies which of the following about problems ragwort poses to dairy farmers. Okay. So livestock would eat it and it can die. It can, fall ill quickly, those kind of things. Milk produced by cows that eat ragwort causes illness in humans who drink it. Nowhere does it mention that the milk would be contaminated. No, we can't infer this thing. Ragwort can supplant the plants normally eaten by cattle. Supplant means, it can kind of replace them. Yes, it displaces, it can displace those plants and cattle will have to eat it in that case. Let's keep this. Cattle, unlike sheep, are unable to differentiate between ragwort. No, it doesn't say that. It says otherwise. Livestock avoid grazing where ragwort is growing. That means it can identify, it can differentiate. So it's wrong to say they cannot differentiate. A is out, B is the only one. So got to be B. Okay. Understood, everyone? Any doubts? Any questions? Okay. One more thing I would like to bring to your notice is questions where only one option is correct. Okay. Versus questions where more than one option can be correct. Okay. Multiple option can be correct. There's a difference. You can identify it by the looks of it. How? Questions in which only one option is correct. The options A, B, C, D would be mentioned inside circles. In the actual exam, I'm talking about. They'll be inside the circles. But questions where more than one option could be correct, it would be like squares. The options A, B, C would be mentioned in the squares. Okay, that's there in GRE in official test. So just be careful about that thing. Okay. All right, let's do second passage. Really good passage, the second one. I mean, I'm not saying it's very difficult, but really good passage. And try just two questions. Try them. Okay, give them a try. All right, let's see this passage. Let's read the passage. African American newspapers in the 30s faced many hardships. Okay. For instance means example. Instance means example. So, example of hardships. Okay. Again, whatever is mentioned in the previous line, in the just finished line, it'll be an example of that only. So we're talking about hardships. Knowing that buyers of African American papers also bought general circulation papers, advertisers of consumer products often ignored African American publications. Okay. So this is the hardship one example of the hardships. Okay. Advertisers discrimination did free the African American press from advertiser domination. Can anybody tell me what role is this line playing? This. Second line tells me one problem area. One hardship. This is telling me
It
one
is giving an
advantage, or let's say one good thing that happened to African American newspapers. Okay. They got free from advertiser domination. How? Editors could print politically charged material more readily than could the large national dailies, which depended on advertisers' ideological approval to secure revenues. Okay. So this line just explains this idea. Okay. Editors could print politically charged material. This line is just explaining what this means. Or let's say it's mentioned to support this claim that advertisers' discrimination actually worked in favor. I mean, it was good for those newspapers somehow. Unfortunately, now when we have some negative word like unfortunately, or let's say, and obviously unfortunately is a negative word, we'll be talking about something unfortunate incident. It also made the selling price of black papers much higher than that of general circulation dailies. Another problem area. Often as much as 2/3 of publications cost had to come from subscribers, subsidies from community politicians and other interest groups. Just expanding on that particular line, that they had to charge more for those newspapers. And despite their editorial freedom, African American publishers often felt compelled to print a disproportionate amount of sensationalism, sports and society news to boost circulation. Another problem area. So only one good thing is mentioned. Only one kind of advantage is mentioned. Rest all are hardships that those newspapers faced. So we are out and out explaining hardships faced by the American newspapers, African American newspapers. Okay, right, everyone? This is what we're talking about, and I guess this is not difficult to understand, but the questions are good. Okay, let's see. Just 1 second. Third, the passage suggests that if advertisers had more frequently purchased advertising, advertisers did not purchase or ignored African American publications while advertising. So had they more frequently purchased advertising in these newspapers, which of the following might have resulted? Okay, so all the problems attributed to this particular thing, so those problems will not happen. African American newspapers would have given more attention to sports and society news than they did. Wrong. Because of lack of advertisement, they had to pay, or they had to kind of print more of that. Okay. If they got more advertisement, they'll have to print less of that. So A is out. Okay. Clear, everyone? This is what it is. Okay. Because of lack of advertisement, they have to pay more attention to those things. So it's wrong to say if they get more advertising, they'll have to pay more attention. Wrong. African American newspapers would have been available at lower prices than large national dailies were. So Jay, you're picking B as one of the options. Where does it say that the prices would be lower than the large national dailies?
Okay, I just like read about the part that it
It's
will
a
lower the
price is
price.
mentioned somewhere, which is here. Selling price of black papers was supposed to be much higher than large national dailies. Okay. So we can say if they get more advertising, the prices will be reduced, right? We can
Yes.
definitely say that because higher selling price is attributed to lack of advertisement. It's straight away given like that. No confusion about that. So if they get more advertising, prices will be reduced. But will it be reduced? Will it be lower than large national dailies? It might be same. How can we say it'll be less than that? Right?
Okay. Okay.
It's a trap option. The prices would definitely go down, but would they go lower than large national daily prices? No. It might be equal. We can say that, or we can't even say it'll be equal or not. But all we can say is the prices that people will have to pay to buy a newspaper would be lesser. Got it? Yeah, understood. It's a trap option,
Yes, yes.
definitely. Hmm.
So if it will be like just lower the prices, so we can
Just lower
say
the prices, we can definitely choose that. Yeah.
okay.
Hmm. Because it's a straight away attribution to lack of advertisement, higher selling price. So if we have more advertisement, it'll be lesser selling price. We can infer that for sure. Okay. African American newspapers would have experienced constraints on their content similar to those experienced. Yes, uh, you know, they were free from any constraints because of lack of advertisement. Now, if they have more advertisement, they'll have to, toe their line, toe the advertisers' line, as uh, large national dailies do. Okay, so definitely we can pick A and B are out. C is the right one. Got it? Clear? Any doubts? All right, let's see. Fourth. The author of the passage suggests which of the following about the advertisers. Okay. Line 3, I mean, uh, whenever the question says line 3, line 5, line 10, it'll be mentioned in that passage on the screen in the exam. Okay. You don't have to scramble for that. Don't worry about that thing. They assume that advertising in African American newspapers would not significantly increase their sales of their products. So, should we keep this option? They were not advertising in African American newspapers. They were advertising only in journal circulation papers because people who were buying African American newspapers, they were also buying journal circulation paper. So, same people, why would they see the ad twice? So, bringing advertisement in African American papers would not serve any extra purpose. We can keep this option. Okay. Right? Same people are getting general circulation paper as well. They are getting African American newspaper as well. So they can advertise only in one and the advertisement will reach the audience. Okay. Advertising in this will not serve any purpose. So A definitely we can keep. Let's see if there is any better option. They fail to calculate accurately the circulation of Africa. I mean, does it say, or how can we say they didn't know or they failed to accurately see the circulation? No. Maybe they knew the circulation and they also knew that those people are getting journal circulation papers as well. So they might be knowing that. They did not take African American newspapers reading into account when making decisions about where to advertise. Uh, I mean, what it means is uh, people reading African American newspapers, they didn't take into account that thing. It's not that they didn't take into account that reading or they kind of ignored that reading. What led to them not giving advertisement in African American newspaper is that people, I mean, advertisement is reaching those same people with journal circulation papers as well. So they have to give advertisement in journal circulation paper any which way because it has a bigger audience. So there is no need to reach here. It's not that the content of the newspaper doesn't matter or they don't take into account that thing. Okay. The reason is different of not giving advertisement. Okay. It's not take, I mean, it's not like not taking into account this thing. No. Okay. Got it? Got this point, everyone? Because this is also a very tempting option. Okay. They avoided African American newspapers partly because of their sensationalism. Again, does it say sensationalism is the reason why they avoided it? No. Okay. They tried to persuade African American newspapers to lower the rates. I mean, totally bogus. It's not mentioned anywhere. Okay. It's just that advertising in those papers will not serve any purpose. That's what why they are not publishing. Okay. Any doubts with any option? Any questions here? All right. Try this. This is actually a good one. Three questions. Slightly, the previous passage was quite easy to understand. This is slightly more complicated. Slightly more content is there. Okay. So just read it slow. Okay. Read the passage slow. Okay. Give it a try. So, gone through, guys? Any answers? Okay. Let's see. In a plausible but speculative scenario. Okay. So it's plausible, it's feasible, it's possible, but still speculative. I mean, we don't have data or information, hardcore information to prove that. Oceanographer Douglas Martinson suggests that temperature increases caused by global warming would not significantly affect the stability of the Antarctic environment, where sea ice forms on the periphery of the continent in the autumn and winter and mostly disappears in the summer. Okay. So global warming, I mean, Douglas Martinson is making a claim that global warming and because of that temperature increases, it will not significantly affect the stability of an Antarctic environment. Okay. That's a claim. So there would be an explanation of that, why that claim is being made. Let's see. True, less sea ice would form in the winter because global warming would cause temperatures to rise. Okay. So more temperatures, you can kind of write this thing. More temperature leads to less ice, obviously. However, Martinson argues the effect of warmer atmosphere may be offset as follows. Okay. The formation of sea ice causes the concentration of salt in surface water to increase. Okay. So when sea ice is there, there'll be concentration of salt in surface water. Less sea ice would mean smaller increase in concentration of salt. So less concentration of salt. Less salty surface waters would be less dense. So less salty means less dense, therefore less likely to sink. So it'll not sink. The surface water is not as dense as it all normally becomes. So it'll not sink and stir up deep water. The deep water with all its stored heat would rise to the surface at a slower rate. So there'll be lesser rise of hot or warm water. Okay. Thus, although the winter sea ice cover might decrease, the surface water would remain cold enough so that the decrease would not be excessive. So if there is more cold, more warm water will come to the surface. But if there is less, the temperature increases, there's less ice, so less hot water will come to the surface. So eventually things will get balanced out. That's what it says, all in all. Okay. It just explains the claim made by this guy, Douglas Martinson. Okay. So that's what we have. Any doubts with any line here? Any options? All right. Let's see. Fifth, it can be inferred from the passage that which of the following is true of the surface waters in the current Antarctic environment. Okay, we are talking about current environment, not when the global warming would happen. Okay, because this is all prediction for the future. Okay, global warming, if it happens, it would not significantly affect the stability and those kind of things. All this is prediction. We're talking about current environment. Okay, what is happening right now? Let's see. They are more affected by annual fluctuations in atmospheric temperatures than they would be if they were less salty. Okay. They would be, 1 second, they'll be more affected or less affected. Okay, they are more affected right now than they would be in fluctuations, I mean, annual fluctuations in atmospheric temperature. See, we are not talking about annual fluctuations anywhere. Annual fluctuations means a cyclic change in temperature every year. We're talking about if global warming happens, if the temperatures on an average increase, what would happen? So we have no idea what would happen nothing is given about annual fluctuations in the atmospheric temperature. Nothing. The only thing that is given about that is that ice is there in autumn and winter and it disappears in summer. Would it change? It doesn't say anything like that. Okay, out. They're less salty than they would be if global warming were to occur. See, what it says is if global warming occurs, there'll be more temperature. More temperature means less ice. Less ice means less concentration of salt or less salty. So the water will become less salty if the temperatures increase. That means currently it is more salty, not less salty. Out. Right? Jay, Lakshay, you're picking B. They're actually more salty. They'll become less salty if global temperatures increase.
So I think that's what that is signaling if global warming will occur,
If
then
it
they
will
will be
occur, what we're talking about
less
is
salty.
current environment.
Okay.
If global warming occur, it'll become less salty. That means right now it is more salty, no? Then what would be the case if global warming were to occur? Right?
Okay.
Yep. Lakshay, make sense?
Yeah, I thought we were talking about
This
global
is tricky.
warming.
These options are tricky. Trust me.
But
Definitely,
then
they're tricky. It needs a lot of concentration to see exactly what is happening in these options. Okay. Right. So uh, take some notes like that. Makes so if there are certain layers to the information, maybe take some notes of those layers. This leads to this. This leads to this. This leads to this. That can help you picturize. Otherwise, you'll have to go back to the passage again and again. It'll take a lot of time. Okay. They are more likely to sink and stir up deep waters than they would be if atmospheric temperatures were to increase. So, if temperatures increase, the waters become less dense and they'll not sink quickly. Okay, they will not sink quickly. That means right now they are more likely to sink. Yes. Okay. What it says is, uh, uh, if it becomes less salty because of more temperatures, it's less likely to sink in that case. That means right now it's more likely to sink. Definitely, this is what is happening. Okay. Abhilasha, you were able to eliminate option B quickly. These are
Yes, sir.
these are really tricky options. So I guess did you take any notes also?
I kind of just went with what was written
Mm-hmm,
in the passage,
mm-hmm. Okay.
and over here they've mentioned, right, that
Yeah, they've
less
mentioned
salty.
everything. Yes, they
Yeah.
mentioned everything.
So
All I'm asking is,
considering
did you take any notes of some form or anything? No.
no, I just read
In
it and
such a case,
everything.
see, in such a case where there is so much content, so much information, try to take some notes. Very simple notes. Okay.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
otherwise we'll have to go back to the passage again and again.
All right.
Okay. And going to passage again and again is very time consuming in first place, and it's very tiring. It's hell tiring, trust me. The mind gets
Mm.
tired very easily when we have to do that again and again. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So C definitely is happening. So after increase, they become less heavy. They are less likely to sink. So right now they are more likely to sink. Okay. They're able to offset some of the effects of global warming. No, no, right now they are not able to offset. I mean, there's no question of offset. If global warming happens, then they'll be able to offset. So this option is actually wrong in that sense. There's no need to offset right now because there is no increase. Offset would be when the temperatures increase. So right now, what do we do with current environment? Nothing. Okay. And it's talk about beyond the Antarctic region. We are not talking about anything beyond Antarctic region. They're less affected by temperature of deep water than they would be if atmospheric temperatures were to increase. They're actually more affected, no? Because deep water after temperature increases globally after global warming, so there'll be less deep water coming up. Okay, it will rise at a slower rate if global temperatures increase. So right now it's more affected. Deep water is coming up faster. So this is also out. C is the only option we can have. Okay. All right. Let's see sixth. So Martinson believes which of the following about deep waters in the Antarctic region. Let's see. they rise to the surface more quickly than they would if global warming were to occur. We just saw that. So deep waters, if temperatures increase, I mean, if global warming happens, deep water will rise slowly. That means their rise to the temperature right now is quicker than would be if global warming were to occur. Right? Lakshay, you got B. How did you eliminate A? Here. Any reason to eliminate A? Or you were still confused? I mean, you were just confused the exactly the same way with the first question. So, I mean, the passage says, after global warming, deep waters rise slowly. That means right now they rise faster. Okay. They store all heat that will exacerbate the effects of increases in atmospheric temperature. Heat will not exacerbate the effects of increases. Heat will actually, it will not rise faster. That's why the things will remain stable. It will offset that increase. So nothing will kind of accentuate that increase. No. They would be
Okay.
likely, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Ah,
So I basically what I did was I just took in that we're talking about before, not the current. I
yeah.
guess.
So we're talking about current. See, I mean,
Okay.
it's a comparison, no? Then they would be if global warming were to occur. That means current versus if global warming occur. The comparison is between those two things, right?
Right.
Hmm.
Right.
So that's why we can keep A, B's out. They would be likely to be significantly warmed by an increase in atmospheric temperatures. Okay. Deep water will be significantly warmed by that. No, they are already warmed because they keep heat. The surface water faces the problems of the change in atmospheric temperature. Okay. Deep water is not affected because of temperature change. They would be more salty than they currently are if global warming were to occur. Deep water is not salty, it's the surface water which gets salty, right? Whether it gets less salty or more salty, it's about surface water. They become heavy and then they sink and those kind of things. It's not the deep water out. They're less likely to be stirred up when surface waters are intensely salty than when surface waters are relatively unsalty. I mean, if it becomes less salty, the stirring is lesser. So they are actually more likely to be stirred up right now than, if it becomes becomes less salty. This is also out. Okay. Jay, got it? I think you didn't answer for this question. So is it clear now? Any
Yeah,
doubts?
got it. Got it.
Okay.
Understood.
Which of the following is true about sea ice that surrounds the Antarctic continent? Okay. The amount of sea ice that forms in the winter has been declining. Does it say it's declining? What all it says is that if global warming occurs, there could be less ice, definitely. But right now, is it kind of declining? No, we don't know. Nothing like that is mentioned. Okay, it's a futuristic prediction. If global warming occurs, it would be, uh, there could be less ice for sure. That's all that is mentioned out there. Okay, nothing else. Right. So A is out. Most of the sea ice that forms in the winter remains intact in the summer. No, it's clearly mentioned the ice remains in autumn and winter, but it goes away in summer. Okay, it melts. Even small changes in the amount of sea ice dramatically affect the temperature of the surface waters. Uh, where is it mentioned that slight changes in amount of sea ice would dramatically affect the temperature of the surface waters? What all it says is if there is, let's say, global warming, temperatures increase globally on an average. So things will the entire system will kind of offset that increase. Okay, they will dramatically get changed. We don't know. changes in amount of sea ice due to global warming would significantly affect the stability. No, no, no. The environment will remain stable. It'll affect less. It will remain relatively stable. That's what the entire premise of the paragraph is. Okay. So they'll affect the stability. No, the environment will offset that because of the stability. Out. Changes in the amount of sea ice affect the degree of saltiness. Yes. You know, less ice means less salty. So it's mentioned out there. Definitely is our answer. Right? Any doubts? Any questions? All right. Let's see next. Eighth, ninth, and 10th. Three questions. I mean, this is a really good passage. Okay. You know, it'll make you think a lot. Okay. Give them a try. All right, let's read the passage. I mean, first of all, did you find it more complex than the other passages, or was it same or on similar lines? Hmm? Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, it was more
More
complex.
complex?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, just the passage or the questions also?
Like questions also, but passage also was a little bit
But
difficult to
little
understand.
more complex to understand. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's read it. And let's see how can we avoid that, how can we take care of that complexity? Okay. While the best 16th century Renaissance scholars uh, mastered the classics of ancient Roman literature in the original Latin and understood them in their original historical context. Now, one thing to notice here is the word while. The word while, although, these words are used, but also, these words are used to create contrast. Okay. So whenever these are used in any sentence, they are the only purpose that they serve is creating a contrast. Okay. So when you see this word while, what you need to see is what are the two things that they're creating contrast between. So we are talking about scholars mastering the classics of ancient Roman literature in the original Latin and understood them in their original historical context. That means there would be other set of people who didn't do it that way, who didn't understand it that way. Most of the scholars educated contemporaries, one second, most of the educated contemporaries of the scholars knew the classics only from school lessons on selected Latin text. Okay. So we are differentiating. See, the first line, the introduction is so long. What are we trying to do in this passage is we are differentiating between Renaissance scholars and their educated contemporaries. We are differentiating between them. Okay, the first the line itself starts with that difference. Okay, so scholars mastered the classics of ancient Roman literature in original Latin and understood the original historical context. The educated contemporaries knew the classics only from the school lessons on selected Latin text. Okay, these were chosen. These means what? The Latin selected Latin texts were chosen by Renaissance teachers after much deliberation for works written by and for the sophisticated adults of pagan Rome were not always considered suitable for Renaissance young. Okay, so the teachers chose some of the text because some of the text were or most of the text or a lot of text were not suitable for the children, the school children, Renaissance young. Semicolon simply means this thing is explained further. The central Roman classics refused, as classics often do, to teach appropriate morality and frequently suggested the opposite. Okay, so the classics do not care about morality. So the teachers thought those classics are not good, not appropriate for kids. That's why they might not have chosen those classics. Teachers accordingly made students need not textual and historical accuracy their supreme interest. Okay, so accuracy is not their interest; it's the students' needs which is of their interest. Therefore, chopping dangerous text into short phrases and using these to impart lessons extemporaneously on a variety of subjects from syntax to service science. Syntax means sentence structure. Science, we know science is what science is. Okay, so the teachers did not present the classical text in their original form to those students. That's the entire game. Okay, and what is the reason? Morality. I mean, the certain classics are not fit morally for students. That's what they said. Thus, I believe that modern reader cannot know the associations that a line of ancient Roman poetry or prose had for any particular educated 16th century reader. So, what it says is a modern reader cannot know what the associations that a line of ancient Roman poetry or prose had for any particular educated 16th century reader. So, educated 16th century reader read the selected text, the curated text. So, how those educated 16th century readers would understand the poetry or prose that would be difficult for a modern reader to understand, because modern reader will read the original text, and those students or those educated people read the curated text only. Okay, so that's it. Simply highlights that particular point. That's it. Clear, guys? Any doubts? So first of all, does this understanding help the way we understood it right now? I mean, those do those things help? That's the first thing I'm asking.
Yes.
So in subsequent sessions, we'll try to refine those techniques much more. Okay, so that even difficult passages won't be difficult to handle. Okay, so we'll keep refining those strategies. Today, I mean, we are just starting up, so we are taking up the basic stuff, but eventually we'll keep refining those strategies. Let's see the questions. Primary purpose. First of all, uh, primary purpose, as a question we'll tackle in the next session. Okay, primary purpose, we'll spend some time primarily on this question only, because it's not just one question, it's the overall understanding of the passage in a particular way. So we'll spend the entire session on that. But for today's for all purposes, for today's purposes, just understand what the second half of the passage says. Second half of the para, whatever it says, that information should be captured in the uh, 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 in the primary purpose answer. Okay, that's the whole point, right? So what are we talking about in this later part? We are talking about why the teachers, why or how the Renaissance teachers, curated or selected uh, 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 some text, not the original ones, some parts of them to teach to the students. Okay, that's what is being discussed out here. Okay, so let's see. Option A: unsuitability of Roman classics for the teaching of morality. I mean, it is mentioned somewhere, but is it the main purpose? It is unsuitable, but this is mentioned to tell me that why teachers were not teaching the entire text, the original text. Mentioning this is not the main purpose. This is mentioned to take us to the main point. Is that point clear, first of all, everyone? You might have certain options which are mentioned in the passage, but what we need to see is that thing that is mentioned. Is it the primary purpose itself? Is it where the author is taking us to eventually? Or that thing is taking us to somewhere else? Okay. So definitely this is not the primary purpose. This is not where the author is trying to take us to. Okay. Why Roman classics were unsuitable? No. Okay. Approach that 16th century scholars took to learning the Roman classics. 16th century scholars, we are not even talking about scholars in the second part. We are talking about teachers teaching Renaissance scholars something in a particular way. So the second part of the passage doesn't even talk about that out. Okay. Understood that point, everyone?
Yes.
Third, yeah. So again, we'll discuss primary purpose in detail, but for today's purposes, just see what is mentioned in the second half. What topic is there in second half? Just that thing should be captured in the primary purpose. Just take it that simplistically. See effect that Roman classics had on educated people. We are not talking about effects that classics had on educated people, the students. No, it is about how they were taught about those classics. Way in which Roman classics were taught. Yes, that's what it is, isn't it? Everything is mentioned to expand on this particular point, or to make us understand this particular point. Everything is meant to take us to this point. Okay. Contrast between the teaching of Roman classics in the Renaissance and the teaching of Roman classics today. We are not even talking about how Roman classics are taught today. Out. And there is no differentiation being made. The differentiation made is how scholars understood those classics versus how those students understood. There is no comparison with the classics today. Sorry, once. Yeah. Okay. There is no comparison how things are read or taught today. There is no comparison with that. Out. It's only D, which is there in second part. Okay. Any doubts with any options here? Ninth. The information in the passage suggests that which of the following would most likely result from students having studied the Roman classics under a typical 16th century teacher. So now what happens when 16th century teacher is teaching? They'll not read the original text. They'll not read the complete text. They'll not even read the historical context. Okay. So the student will not get a hint of those kind of things. Right? Let's see. And what purpose is served by teaching them in a certain way? Teacher is more concerned about students' need rather than accuracy. Okay, chopping certain text into short phrases, and those are used to impart lessons on variety of subjects, including syntax to science. Syntax means again sentence structure. Science is science. Let's see. The student recalls a line of Roman poetry in conjunction with a point learned about grammar. So it's mentioned there that those imparted phrases, they're used for syntax as well. Syntax is loosely we can call it grammar. Okay, sentence structure, tenses, and all that. So poetry is being mentioned to explain grammar. Yes, this point is mentioned out there. Let's keep this. Okay. Lakshay, how do you remove option A? You're mentioning B. So Jay, you're also removing A. How? Do we have any reason? I mean, are we clear on this point that uh, those classics were, cut down portions of those classics were taught to, understand syntax as well, right?
And so I thought like if that portion is cut, then the students won't recall that.
No,
So
but it's like some portions are mentioned to explain grammar. So those portions, the student might be able to link to the grammar. That's it. That's all it says. Okay. Student recalls some line of
yeah,
the poetry in connection with or in conjunction with something about grammar, right? This is all it means, nothing else, right? Lakshay, does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does now.
Let's see other options. Student argues that a Roman poem about gluttony is not morally offensive when it is understood in its historical context. See, they don't read the actual historical context. They don't actually, I mean, they are not taught the actual historical context because the classics, the text could be offensive. That's one strong reason that is mentioned out there. Okay. So, but if they're told about the exact historical context, would they find it morally offensive or not? I don't know. They might not. Right now, that offensive part is taken out by the teachers, and it's mentioned they are not worried about historical accuracy. So they might not teach actual historical context to cut down on that offensive part. But when the student sees the actual context, I don't know how he or she will react. We don't know. Okay, out. Right, Lakshay, you're picking B. So this is the problem with B.
Okay. Got it.
Good. See, the student is easily able to express thoughts in Latin. I mean, I don't know whether they'll be able to express because they are not taught original Latin. It's mentioned. So, I mean, it's hard to pick C. We can't. Students has mastered large portions of Roman classics. How do we know that? Jay, you're picking D. How do you know they've mastered large portions of Roman classics?
So like in the first line, it was written that mastered the classic of ancient.
Those are scholars, not students.
Okay.
And the difference is made between scholars and students. That's the entire point, actually. Isn't it?
Okay.
Ah,
Got it.
yeah. So D is out. The student has a sophisticated knowledge of Roman poetry, but little knowledge of Roman prose. Uh, can we say student has sophisticated knowledge of Roman poetry? He or she is not even taught proper poetry, actually. Cut down portions are taught to him, and not even in actual context. Wrong. Out. Okay. So A is the answer here. Any doubts with any options, let me know. 10th is a good question. Which of the following, if true, would most seriously weaken the assertion made in the passage concerning what a modern reader cannot know? Okay. Let's see. Let's see that line itself in first place. The modern reader cannot know what? The associations that a line of ancient Roman poetry or prose had for any particular educated 16th century reader. What it simply means is, so what it says is, modern reader is reading, let's say, the entire classic in the actual way it is available. But those students, 16th century students, they are reading cut down portions. So what is the understanding of those students? The modern reader cannot know that. Okay, that is given in the passage. Because modern reader is reading the complete text or the actual text, but the students did not read the actual text or the complete text. So the claim is, the assertion is that modern reader cannot understand the understanding of the students. We need to weaken that assertion that modern reader can actually understand. What information will tell me that modern reader can understand? Okay, we need to weaken that he cannot understand. So opposite of that would be the modern reader can understand. What information will tell me that thing? That's the question. Let's see. So modern readers are thoroughly familiar with the classics of ancient Roman literature because they majored in classics. We already know that, and that's the whole reason why they can't understand. They read the classics, modern readers, but the students didn't read the classics in the original sense. So it'll not, take away that confusion. We need to take away the confusion that modern reader might have about those students. Okay. First of all, everybody understood the question here, what exactly we need to do. Any doubts with that part? Let me know first. Okay. Lakshya, picking two options for 10th. You're picking two options or you're confused between those two options? What are you doing?
I'm just confused between both.
Okay.
Con-
Okay. So first option is out for sure. Some modern readers have learned which particular works of Roman literature were taught to students in the 16th century. See, certain works were taught, but what cut down versions were taught, we don't know. Okay. I mean, they were not taught the entire work. So just by, saying that they read some portions of one book, we don't know what portions they read and in what context were they taught. No, we don't know. Modern readers can, with some effort, discover that 16th century teachers selected some seemingly dangerous classic text while excluding other seemingly innocuous texts. So, what it says is, uh, modern readers figured out what dangerous classic texts were selected and what innocuous means, kind of innocent text, easy text were excluded. What purpose would it serve? Lakshay, you are confused with this option as well. So if they are told what texts were removed, what texts were taught, but would they tell, I mean, would it tell them in what form were they taught? If I tell you Book X was taught, books Y was not taught. But in what form, in what context, what was the understanding of those students with of that books X and Y? Would they understand that? Would modern readers understand that? No. Right? Lakshay, make sense?
Yes.
Yep. Copies of many of the classic texts used by 16th century teachers, including marginal notes describing the oral lessons that were based on those texts. See, those students were taught certain moral lessons based on certain texts. If the uh, modern readers get hold of those things, they might understand what they might be able to comprehend what those students understood. So this would weaken that assertion made by the uh, made about those modern readers. Okay, okay, got it, everyone. Got the understanding, got the meaning of the entire option. First of all, any doubts with that? Let's see option E. Many of the writings of the best 16th century Renaissance scholars have been translated from Latin. I mean, we are talking about Renaissance scholars. Students didn't read what scholars wrote or something. I'll have no bearing on that. Okay. Okay. Any doubts? Any questions? If anybody has here, let me know. All right. Let's do this. One more passage. In humans, the pilometer reflex leads to something like this. Okay. Give it a try. Let's see the passage first. In humans, the pilomotor reflex leads to the response commonly known as goosebumps. So goosebumps, the technical uh, uh, term is pilomotor reflex. And this response is widely considered to be vestigial, that is something formerly having a greater physiological advantage than at present. Okay. So some goosebumps, this response, earlier it had more advantage, physiological advantage. Right now it doesn't have that much advantage. It occurs when the tiny muscles at the base of hair follicle contracts, pulling the hair upright. So, it simply explains the technical part of it. Okay. Uh, in animals with feathers, fur, or quills, this creates a layer of insulating warm air, or a reason for predators to think twice before attacking. So this was the advantage. I mean, this is the advantage for those kind of animals, right? Remember physiological advantage we're talking about. But human hair is too puny to serve these functions. Goosebumps in humans may, however, have acquired a new role. Okay. Remember, earlier psychological advantage was more, right now it is lesser. So what could be that new purpose or new role of that particular reflex? Like flushing, another thermoregulatory heat regulating mechanism, goosebumps have become linked with emotional responses. Okay. Notably fear, rage, or the pleasure of, say, listening to beautiful music. Okay. They may thus serve as a signal to others. Okay. So, like flushing is one thermoregulatory behavior, heat regulation behavior. Goosebump is linked with emotional stress. Okay. So, and these kind of emotions are kind of indicated by, this might serve as signal to others. Uh, uh, these goosebumps might serve as signal of these emotions to others. That's what it says. Okay. So, not a difficult passage to understand, obviously. Let's see the questions. One second. Okay. In explaining the new role is where? Yeah, it might have acquired a new role there. Okay, this is what we're talking about as new role. The goosebumps in humans may have acquired, the author assumes, which of the following? Okay. Uh, Emotional responses in humans can be triggered by thermoregulatory mechanisms. Uh, you know, Thermoregulatory, is it triggering that mechanism? No. Flushing, I mean, thermoregulatory thing is mentioned only about flushing, that flushing is a thermoregulatory behavior. Okay. It's these emotions which are triggering that response, not that regulatory mechanism. No, not at all. Okay, understood this point? It doesn't say thermoregulatory behavior is kicking in those responses. Okay, Lakshay, does it say thermoregulatory mechanism is kicking in those responses at any point?
No, I don't think so. No.
It doesn't say thermoregulatory behavior or mechanism is the cause of those responses. It doesn't say that.
But
Okay.
it does say, no, like, have acquired a new role, like flushing, another
I
thermoregulatory
mean,
mechanism.
let's say flushing is a thermoregulatory behavior, and this goosebumps is also a thermoregulatory behavior, let's say. But it doesn't kick in. Thermoregulatory behavior mechanism is not the cause of it.
Yeah,
That's a
right.
different thing altogether. Okay. Flushing is a thermoregulatory behavior mechanism. All right. Is it causing emotional responses? No. Nowhere does it mean that way. Right? So we need to be clear about something is mentioned in the passage in a certain way, but is it mentioned as a cause of those emotional responses? No. Not at all. The perceptibility, the perception of emotional responses to other humans offers some kind of benefit. Okay. You know, these, first of all, emotional responses serve as signals to others. That is mentioned to us. Okay. So these emotional responses uh, serving as signals to other humans. Now, does it say it's a kind of benefit? Does it say anywhere? Hmm? Jay, you're picking B. Does it say anywhere it's a benefit?
No.
Yes, it does say.
Okay.
Remember, these goosebumps have a greater psychological advantage earlier than at present. That means the benefit earlier was more than the benefit it has right now. So it goes on to mention the benefits earlier versus the benefits now. This is a benefit that is mentioned. Okay. We'll have to read it in the context of the entire passage. Getting my point?
Okay, got
Yeah,
it.
it is mentioned. I mean, you picked B.
Hmm.
How can you say, it's not mentioned?
No, actually, I thought like it is saying that they may serve as signal to others.
Signal,
So
right?
does
But is
that
that
signal
signal a
have?
benefit or not? That's what we are, debating, right?
So
It's
I thought
mentioned.
like the author assumed that it is benefit. That's why they wrote
Uh, Assumes as
because they're
in,
asking. No, the
yeah.
author
Author
assumed.
is, author is differentiating between what were the advantages earlier and what are the advantages right now. So author mentioned some advantages earlier. Now author is mentioning this as a later stage, as a current thing. That means author is assuming this as an advantage. That's the entire point, right?
Okay.
Ah. So author is mentioning it as a difference between advantage earlier and advantage right now. So author is mentioning as a form of advantage. Author thinks it's an advantage. Simple. Okay. So we can keep B, right? Lakshay, is that fine? Option B, what it exactly means,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Yeah. If human hair were more substantial, I mean, they are too puny right now to serve these functions. Goosebumps would not have acquired a new role. We can't say that. Okay, we can't say they would not acquire a new role. The thing is, earlier they used to serve another role. Right now, they are serving another role. That's it. We can't say the role wouldn't have changed. No. Goosebumps in animals with feathers, fur, or quills may also be linked to emotional responses. We can't say that. Okay. The reasons are mentioned. Or the purposes served are mentioned here. We can't say it's it could be linked to emotional response. No, not at all. I don't know. In humans, goosebumps represent an older cycle physiological. No, it's a newer ones. No, okay. We are comparing between what goosebumps versus flushing. Goosebumps are older response than flushing. I can't compare. Okay. Flushing and goosebumps are mentioned in terms of they being similar. There is no differentiation between them in the entire passage. Any option which talks about the difference between them, I can't take it. Simple. Okay. Out. So that was 11th. Let's see 12th. Which of the following best describes the primary function of the next to last sentence? Like music. Where do we have it? This. This is the last sentence. Second last sentence. Okay. So, remember, we need to read the passage in terms of role of every line. We have a direct question. What role, what function does this line play? Okay. Now, what do you think? What is the role it's playing? Anyone? What role is this line playing? See, this line is following another line, which is goosebumps may have acquired a new role. And this just goes on to explain that new role. That's it. Remember, when we make any claim, the next line mostly is, expanding upon that claim, why we are making that claim, or just explaining that thing. It might have acquired a new role. It's explaining that new role. Option E. Okay. We'll go through other options, but it's a state away function of this rule. Okay. Lakshay? I mean, do we have any reason to eliminate E as of now?
Doesn't know.
We'll
Don't think
we'll
so.
come to option D. I can understand why you would have picked option D, but we'll come to that. Okay. We'll explain that. Let's see other options. It makes a distinction between two types of mechanisms. No, it's not making any distinction. It actually tells me similar things, flushing and goosebumps, and what role it does it play. It corrects a common misconception. There is no misconception mentioned. I mean, there is no misconception which is getting corrected anywhere in the entire passage. It suggests reasons for the connection between emotional responses and goosebumps in humans. Reasons for connection? No. Okay. Are we talking about why emotional responses are connected to goosebumps? Is that what we are discussing? No. We are just discussing what is the role that goosebumps might play right now, and the role is serving something connected to emotional responses. It doesn't say what reasons are there. No. It suggests that flushing and goosebumps signal the same emotional state. Okay. See, this line does tell me similarity between goosebumps and the other thing, which is this flushing. But is it the purpose for which this line has been mentioned? That's what we're talking about. Okay. See, this similarity has been shown, but why? To explain that goosebumps serve a new role. Right, Lakshay? Does it make sense more now? Does it make more sense? It does tell me some, let's say, kind of similarities, but is it the purpose of that? The purpose is to tell a new role by talking about similarity about, with something else like flushing. Right? That's why D is not the purpose, E is the purpose. Right?
Okay.
And where does it say that they signal the same emotional state? It doesn't say. They both might be linked to emotional responses, but would both of them signal the same emotional state? Can we say that? No. Right? So both
Yeah.
fact-wise and role-wise, we can't pick this option. Okay. Right. I mean, it's like why that line has been mentioned. This is what we are answering. This line is mentioned not to suggest that these two are similar things, but this line is mentioned to explain or expand upon that role, new role we are talking about. Okay. Got it? Any doubts anywhere here? Let me know. So that's it for today, and we'll continue with RC in next 2 sessions as well. And there are things that we need to understand in RC which which are much more than, or which go much beyond than what we did today. Okay. So all right, thank you guys. See you next week. Bye bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you.